Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Easy English StoryLab. In today's video, you will practice English with a deeper emotional story designed for B2 to C1 learners. Listen carefully, pause the video, and repeat after me. Try to copy the pronunciation, rhythm, and emotional tone. This is the shadowing technique. Now, let's begin. My name is Elena, and I'm 29 years old. For most of my life, I believed that timing was just an excuse people used when love didn't work out. I used to think that if two people cared enough, they would find a way to make things work. I don't believe that anymore. I met Daniel on a day that didn't feel important at all. It was raining, and the sky was the same dull gray that had covered the city for weeks. I remember feeling tired, not physically, but emotionally, like I was moving through life without really expecting anything new to happen. I stopped at a small cafe near my office, mostly to escape the rain. The place was crowded, warm, and filled with the smell of coffee. I stood in line, looking at my phone, when I heard someone gently arguing with the barista. "I promise I'm not being difficult," a voice said, calm but amused. "I just can't drink regular milk." I looked up. He was smiling, slightly embarrassed, but clearly used to this kind of conversation. When our eyes met, I smiled without thinking. That was the beginning. We ended up sitting at the same table because there were no free seats. At first, we exchanged the usual small talk, the weather, the long lines, the fact that the city never seemed to slow down. But something about the conversation felt effortless. There was no pressure to impress, no awkward pauses. It felt like two people meeting in the middle of their lives, without expectations. We talked about work, about travel, about the strange feeling of being an adult but still not completely sure who you are. I told him about the job I had recently started. He told me about changing careers after years of doing something that made him miserable. There was honesty in the way he spoke, not dramatic honesty, just quiet truth. Time passed quickly. When I checked my phone, I realized I was already late. "I should go," I said, laughing. "Me too," he replied, "but I'm glad the rain made us stop." We exchanged numbers. It felt natural, almost inevitable. Over the next weeks, we saw each other often. Coffee turned into long walks. Walks turned into dinners. Dinners turned into conversations that lasted until midnight. I felt understood in a way I hadn't felt in years. He listened, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak. But there was also something I couldn't name at first, a distance, not physical but emotional, like part of him was always slightly out of reach. Sometimes in the middle of a conversation, he would go quiet. His eyes would lose focus, as if he were somewhere else. "Are you okay?" I would ask. "Yeah," he'd say quickly, "just tired." I wanted to believe him. Maybe I even chose to. One evening, we sat by the river, watching the city lights reflect on the water. It should have been a perfect moment. "I'm really happy we met," I said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. And for the first time, I felt it clearly, that quiet imbalance between us. I was stepping forward. He was standing still. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. People carry emotional weight. People have histories. Not everyone opens up at the same pace. I repeated these ideas in my head as if they were facts instead of comfort. Daniel was kind. He was thoughtful. He remembered small details about my life, my sister's exam, my dislike of crowded places, the way I always ordered tea instead of coffee at night. These were not the actions of someone careless. But love is not built only on kindness. It is built on presence, on emotional availability, on the quiet but clear decision to move toward someone, not away from them. And that was where something felt different. Sometimes, when we sat together, I felt close to him, deeply close. But other times, it was as if a transparent wall existed between us. I could see him, I could hear him, but I couldn't reach him. One night, while we were walking home after dinner, I asked gently, "Do you ever feel like something is holding you back?" He didn't answer immediately. He kept walking, hands in his pockets, eyes on the pavement. "Sometimes," he said finally, "I've just learned not to expect too much from anything." His voice was calm, but the words felt heavy. "What do you mean?" I asked. He gave a small smile. "I mean, I don't like depending on things that can disappear." I knew then that he wasn't talking about work or hobbies. He was talking about people, about love. After that conversation, I started noticing more. He avoided talking about the future, not in an obvious way, just subtle shifts in subject, small jokes, gentle redirections. If I mentioned a trip we could take, he'd say, "Let's see what happens." If I talked about plans months ahead, he'd say, "Life changes fast." I began to understand that his way of protecting himself was to never fully arrive anywhere, not in dreams, not in relationships. And yet, I stayed. I stayed because what we had in the present felt real, because our conversations still mattered, because his hand in mine still felt warm. But slowly, something inside me started to change. I found myself thinking more, analyzing more, wondering where I stood. One evening, after he left my apartment, I sat alone in the silence and realized something painful. I was investing in a future he wasn't even considering. I was building emotional depth. He was maintaining emotional safety. There's a quiet loneliness in loving someone who isn't ready. It's not loud. It doesn't come with dramatic arguments. It's softer than that. It's the feeling of reaching out and sensing hesitation in the other hand. It's loving fully while the other person loves carefully. One night, I finally asked the question I had been avoiding. "Daniel," I said, my voice steady but my heart racing, "what do you want from this?" He looked at me for a long moment, not with confusion, but with something else, fear. "I don't know," he said honestly. And in that moment, I understood. He cared about me, but caring and being ready are not the same thing. When he said, "I don't know," something inside me became very quiet. There was no anger in that moment, no dramatic heartbreak, just a clear, calm understanding settling in. He wasn't lying to me. He wasn't playing with my feelings. He simply wasn't in the same place I was. And the painful truth was this: love cannot grow where readiness does not exist. I looked at him and saw it clearly, not who he could become, not who I hoped he would be, but who he was right then, a person still healing, still protecting himself, still afraid of giving something he might lose. And I realized something equally important. I deserved someone who was not afraid to meet me where I stood. The next days felt strange. We still talked, we still met, But something had shifted inside me. I was no longer trying to convince myself that patience would fix everything. Patience can support love, but it cannot replace mutual willingness. One evening, we sat in silence on a park bench. The air was cool, and the world around us felt distant. "I care about you," I said softly. "I know," he replied, "but I need more than what you can give right now." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if he had known this was coming. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. "I know," I answered, "and I don't want to stay in something that slowly hurts me either." There was no argument, no blame, just two people sitting in the reality they could no longer ignore. Saying goodbye to someone who never truly belonged to you is a different kind of pain. It's quiet. It lingers. It doesn't explode. It settles slowly, like fog. But there was also something else beneath the sadness. Relief. Relief that I had chosen honesty over hope. Relief that I had listened to my own needs instead of silencing them. Weeks passed. The ache didn't disappear immediately. I still thought of him when I passed the cafe where we first met. I still remembered the way conversations with him felt easy and safe. But over time, another feeling grew stronger than the loss. Respect. Respect for myself. I had loved fully. I had shown up with openness. And when I realized love alone wasn't enough, I had the courage to step away. Some people come into our lives not to stay, but to teach us the difference between connection and compatibility. Daniel taught me that timing is not an excuse, it is a reality. You can meet the right person at the wrong moment, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for both of you, is to let go. Now it's your turn. Listen again. Pause after each sentence. Repeat out loud. Copy the pronunciation, rhythm, and emotion. This story uses deeper vocabulary and emotional expressions to help you move towards C1 fluency. You don't need perfect English. You need honesty in your voice and practice in your speech. Thank you for learning with Easy English StoryLab. See you in the next story.